Welcome to E Squared Emporium for all things AP Psychology. Today, we will be looking deeper into the cognitive chapter. We'll be looking at specifically thinking in Module 2.2. Let's start with schema. We've already learned the words perceptual set and mental set, and schema just means that through our experience, we have formed concepts where to organize and interpret all new terms, all new unfamiliar information that comes to us. We recognize this is a vegetable, this is an animal, this is a science class, and we are able to form those concepts and then add to those concepts. It is a mental framework. It helps us organize and process and store information as we explore our environment. We interpret new experiences through this lens. So the picture there, we see the schema of doggy, and then the little girl sees a cat, and a cat is not a doggy, so the little girl has to add to her schema and create dogs and cats. So again, another example. If you were afraid of dogs, maybe something happened to you when you were a little child, and now you're afraid of dogs, then that is your schema. Your schema is activated when you see a dog and you get nervous and you get worried. So you also might activate that schema when you see a unicorn and a balloon animal and a bear and a cat until you develop new schema for each of those things so that now you have a separate schema for how I feel about cats, how I feel about balloon animals, how I feel about unicorns, and it's all based on your experience. So we assimilate or we accommodate when we're coming across new information. Assimilation is the process of taking in new information, like there's a cat is not a dog. So we take in new information and we see, can I incorporate that into my existing schemas? Well, if the schema is animals or pets, then yes, you could incorporate that into your existing schema. Accommodation is when we have to modify the existing schemas or we create new ones because now we have new information we need to modify and create a new category. All of these theories come from the Swiss developmental psychologist Jean Piaget. A prototype is a concept compared to the ideal example of whatever we think the ideal is. So when you see a new example of something or a new species of something, you compare it to the original prototype. You say, does this belong in that category? We do this with cars. We're like, oh, is that a sedan? Is that a hatchback? Is that a truck? Is that an SUV? And now we have crossovers. So we have an ideal example that we compare all new models to. The examples here, again, are dogs. So what's the prototype of a dog? Well, a dog has 4 legs, a dog barks, a dog leaves paw prints, a dog has ears and a tail, a dog sniffs around. So then we separate into separate breeds from there, but there is a dog prototype. Is that a dog? No, that is a honey badger. It has 4 legs and ears and a tail, but it doesn't do any of the other things that a dog does. Another example here, we see the prototypical birds all the way on the left, birds that are what we think of as birds that can fly. Then we have unusual birds like the ostrich or the emu or birds that cannot fly. And then we have even more unusual birds. And then we get to things that are not birds. They fly. Butterflies and bats fly, but they are not birds. So this is what we mean by the prototype of the bird and then moving all the way to the not bird. An algorithm is a step-by-step procedure that we do when we try to solve a particular problem. It is a very slow way to work through. You do algorithms in math, you do algorithms in physics and other higher sciences. So you do guarantee that you're going to solve the problem. You do have to follow every single step in the exact right procedure. It is very slow. You do eventually get there. But we don't have time to do this with all the decisions you make in a day. Do I bring this sweater? What route do I take home? What should I eat for lunch? Did I pack my gym bag? Should I wear this outfit today? We don't have time to do a step-by-step pros and cons list and make a mathematical equation on every one of these things. So instead, we use a heuristic. A heuristic is a shortcut. It is a simple thinking strategy. It allows us to make very quick judgments. It allows us to solve many problems much faster. But we are much more error prone. We make a lot more mistakes when we jump to conclusions with a heuristic. We kind of jump to what we think is the right answer, and we're sometimes not right. So there's two examples of heuristics. Representative heuristics represent something. So it's a mental shortcut that involves making a judgment based on how we think that is compared to the prototype or the stereotype. This is where stereotypes come from. It is a type of cognitive bias. It does lead us to serious errors in our decision making. So, based on our experience, we would say that all dogs are this way. We would say that all science is this or all math is that. So, we have a stereotype or a prototype, and then everything else is kind of judged against that. Availability heuristic is another way we make mental shortcuts and decisions. This is based on the facts that we have available. So there is so much information out in the world right now. We have so many news channels. We can get international news, you can get online news and cable news and local news. You can get biased news and unbiased news, and you can get news 24/7. We can't possibly watch all of that. We can't possibly read all of that. We can only go look for what's actually available to us. And that is the information that we use to make a decision. So, based on the 5 seconds of research that we did, or based on the one channel that we watched, or based on the small little amount of whatever it is that we read in a brochure or we saw somewhere, that is the information that we use to make decisions. So, it is only what is available. It is also what is sort of top of mind, things that we read somewhere or we picked up somewhere and they're at the top of our mind when the subject comes up. So again, here's another example. I've never heard of a news story about diabetes as a cause of death, so it must not be true, right? There was a bus accident on the news, so riding the bus must be dangerous. Wow, I'm never going to ride the bus again. So just based on one little piece of information, one little news story, just the information that's most available to us, it's the most recent, it's being the most covered in the media, and it seems to be the most likely thing. We jump to that conclusion. Functional fixedness is when we're stuck with only one way to solve something. We cannot think outside the box. We only have one strategy. It impairs creative thinking. In fact, it's the opposite of creative thinking. We are trapped in a cycle of sticking with only what we know. This is how I do it. This is how it's always been done, and I can't change it. So there is a comfort in repeating our tasks and doing it over and over and over the same way, but sometimes that's too rigid and it'll block us from finding a better solution. What if there's a better way? So most everybody who's an inventor has had to get rid of functional fixedness in their thinking in order to invent a new way to do things. So an example of this, doctors tend to continue to see the same disease, the disease that they're used to treating most often, the disease that they were trained most for in college. Maybe it was a disease that they interned for when they were, in their internship. So it's often very hard to get a diagnosis for something very rare or something that's a brand new condition because the doctors will just say, "Oh no, that's this because I see that all the time." And so that's absolutely what you have because I know what you have. And we get kind of fixed in there's only one way to do it. It's this drug or this surgery, and that's the way we do it. So the candle problem is actually the original study in 1945 of how they were able to test for people who had functional fixedness. So you gave people these three items listed there as A. You gave them a matches, you gave them a box with thumbtacks, and you gave them a candle. And they had to figure out how to attach the candle to the wall and light it with only those three objects. Now, most people saw a box of pins, of thumbtacks, and therefore they got stuck right there and they couldn't figure out what to do. They couldn't figure out how to solve this. But those people who could get out of the box, they saw a box and there were thumbtacks or pins. They were two separate items. The pins didn't have to stay in the box. So if you put the pins down somewhere, then you can use the pins to put the box on the wall and then put the candle in the box and then light the candle and you solve the problem. Divergent thinking is the way of exploring many possible solutions. So when we sit down and say, okay, we call it brainstorming, right? We're going to brainstorm all the different possible ways. It's not exactly the same thing as creativity, but it typically involves some creativity, and creative people do tend to have divergent thinking. So this is the opposite of functional fixedness. So you're able to just brainstorm all the different ways and all the different possibilities and as many possible solutions. Convergent thinking is the way that we typically test you in school. Standardized testing, even AP testing, the standardized part, the multiple choice part, ACT, SAT, all of that, Um, any kind of question that invites only one correct answer. It's only A, it's only C, it's only D. We know that life isn't like that, so why test like that? So framing is another word for this is going to be priming, but framing is the way that the issue is posed. It's the way that the question is framed. You can ask somebody a question and frame it so that you get the desired answer. You frame it so that you get exactly what you want. So you can frame it so that the glass is half full. You can frame it so that the glass is half empty. So you can make it so that the person that you're asking sort of has to go for the way that you're phrasing it. And again, we'll talk about priming in just a minute. Often framing and priming are used interchangeably. They're slightly different. So here's an example here. Frozen yogurt contains 20% fat, or frozen yogurt that's 80% fat-free. Well, which one sounds better? It's the way that you frame it, right? If you're trying to lose weight, then you're going to go for the one that's fat-free, even though they're saying the exact same thing. Both of them are saying that there's 20% fat, but you can frame it in a way that makes people want to eat it. Like when we say something is sugar-free. Well, it's got something in it that makes it sweet. It's just not sugar. Priming and the priming effect is similar. It's when we expose you to certain stimulus in order to influence your response to a prompt. You may not be aware of the connection. It's in your subconscious and you're not aware. But one example is when people bake cookies to try to sell their house. And the belief is that if you make your house smell really yummy or make it smell like cinnamon or make it smell like homemade bread, that when potential buyers come to your house, they are primed by scent, they are primed to say, wow, I could really live here. This smells like home. There's a really homey, comfortable feeling here in this house. And so you primed the person. There are some obstacles to problem solving. Let's look at those. Confirmation bias. So we already know about this. We've talked about it, but it was unit 0. It was a while ago. We look for the evidence that will support what we already believe. Now, we see this happening with politics all the time. This happens with music. If you believe your type of music is better than somebody else's type of music, you will look for the articles. This happens when we're looking for food plans or diet plans or, nutrition plans for athletes. And you're like, I want to look up keto plans. Well, guess what? Google is only going to bring you is only going to bring you those type of plans. So whatever it is that you're looking for, if you're looking for keto or paleo, it's only going to bring you that. So we're going to ignore all the facts and all the evidence that may tell us don't do that, or it may tell us there's another option, or it may tell us there's another side to the story. We only look at the stuff that supports what we already believe. We only look at the stuff that supports what we want to see. So if you want to continue vaping or smoking, you're only going to look at the articles that say it somehow has some benefits, and that's going to be your confirmation bias. It's a very bizarre fact that showing somebody facts will not change their mind. You can bring them all the facts in the world, all the peer review articles in the world. It will not change their mind. The gambler's fallacy is a bias that we have. It's a cognitive bias. It's when we let past experiences influence our decisions about what's going to happen next. And it's named that because of people who gamble. So you know that every time you bet on black, bet on a black 8 or black 31 here on the roulette table, you know that every single time you did that, you lost, but you're going to keep doing it because you know any second it's going to happen. So you just keep believing. You believe and hope that, it's going to happen. And so you get deeper and deeper and deeper into debt because you keep gambling on this decision or this prediction about what you think is going to happen next. And that's called the gambler's fallacy. It happens when people bet on horses, when they bet in gambling. It happens in a lot of situations, stock market, economics. And the sunk cost fallacy, this is also kind of an economics term. It's the belief that because time and resources have already been invested, that you should just keep going. Changing midstream would be wasteful. So, maybe you know that you're in the wrong relationship with somebody, but you've been with them for a while and, the holidays are coming up and you've already spent so much time and you've already bought them a gift. So you might as well just stick it out. Or, you take a college course, you're involved in a college major and you realize you don't really like it, but you're already 2 years in and you've already spent so much money and you already have so many classes. So I'm just going to stick with it, even though I really don't think this is what I want to do, because changing midstream just doesn't seem like the right choice. Hindsight bias, again, we already know this from Unit 0. It is the tendency to perceive past events as having been more predictable than they really are. So once something has happened, everyone's like, oh, I knew it would happen. Oh, I knew that was going to happen. And now you are prepared for class, and we will do the rest together.